So I'd like to introduce Don. Don is the John Elliott Professor of Material Chemistry in the Department of Material Science and Engineering at MIT. He studies the extreme electrochemistry direct towards two aspects of application. The first one is batteries for great scale storage and electric vehicles. And the second one is towards the environmentally sound metal extraction technologies. Don is author of over 180 scientific papers and the inventor of 35 US patents. He's the inventor of a liquid metal battery for large-scale stationary storage and molten oxide electrolysis for carbon-free steelmaking. He's the founder of 6 companies. He is an entrepreneur very much involved in this area. That 6 companies he founded include Embry, Boston Metal, Avanti Battery, Pure Lithium, Luna Resources, and Sadoway Labs. And in 2012, he's named by the Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. So without further ado, let me pass the forum to Professor Don Sadoway.
Well, thank you, Jinhua. It's a pleasure to be part of the Mobility Forum, and I thank you for inviting me back. You can see the title. Jinhua suggested this, Bumps Along the Road. So let's look at this, and let's see if I can make the slide change. So, I always like to start with this slide that just reminds us that electric future is really important in the future of deep decarbonization and so on. And then when we look at how to get there, storage is going to be a key enabler, and that's going to be a theme that I come back to here. It's all about storage. And so what are the things that we need for widespread adoption of electric vehicles? Cost parity with legacy technology. No one has ever been asked to pay more for less. An electric vehicle goes less far, and it takes much longer to refuel and so on. We have to address those things. And the cost is dominated by the battery cost. So the battery has to be top of the list for innovation. The second thing that's preventing is range anxiety. They can't go as far. And then finally, access to charging points. And I'll return to these themes. Now, if you take a look at cost, this is something from Bloomberg New Energy Finance. It starts at year 2010 with $1,000 per kilowatt hour for lithium ion. And they took these data points and they fit them to a semi-logarithmic plot. And from the slope of that, they say 19% rate of learning. I don't know where they get this stuff from. I don't believe that at all. But anyways, they go ahead and they project it out, and they're saying that by 2030, a lithium ion, this is just the cell price, the individual cell, not the pack, but the individual cell will be down to $73 per kilowatt hour. But if you look at the recent press, you see that this is not going to happen. You look here that the prices of the various battery metals have been going up by 2x, 3x, 4x. And the same thing here. This is another one just about lithium itself. It's going from $9,600 a ton for the lithium carbonate up to $50,000 per ton. This is crazy. You can't have those kinds of numbers and then project out what they have on this graph. So we're here at 2022, about 109. They're saying that's going to go by 109 in 2026. Right now, we're probably about 150, 155. But with those price increases on the raw materials, the polite thing to say is we've hit a plateau. But I think realistically, we're probably going to see a boomerang here. We're going to see the price start to rise for the battery. And so the remedy here, in my opinion, is to break the reliance on lithium-ion battery chemistry. And I've said in my TED Talk, if you want to make something dirt cheap, you make it out of dirt, and preferably dirt that's locally sourced. That way you have a secure supply chain. If there's something that the pandemic has taught us, is that this whole race to globalization and outsourcing, find a place where the labor is cheap and so on and so forth, it's not working because the supply chains are unreliable. And so that means we have to invent a new battery chemistry, one with no cobalt, no nickel, and no lithium. And by the way, no fire. You know, the lithium-ion battery, it's flammable. Look at this story about the ship that's on fire. All those electric vehicles, once they caught fire, you can't put that fire out. There's nothing you can do. You pour water on it, it doesn't help. You try to smother it with carbon dioxide, doesn't help. This is going to raise some interesting concerns on the part of insurers. The insurers are going to give you a bigger bill for your car insurance than you have with your gasoline-powered vehicle. So when you talk about breaking the reliance on the lithium-ion battery, well, why don't the automakers get there? And it's my observation, they never invest in the requisite R&D because they're impatient. If I talk to an automaker about a new battery chemistry, the only response I get is, can I put that battery in the car this afternoon? They will not make any investment. Even things like USABC, Advanced Battery Consortium, they wouldn't put money into research. And so there we are. 30 years later, we're still working with the old lithium-ion chemistry. And you say, well, what about the battery makers? They don't invest in anything either. You know, the lithium-ion battery did not come from the battery industry. The battery industry was in 1990 was all nickel metal hydride, and they didn't invest anything in new battery chemistry. Lithium-ion came from Sony because Sony wanted a better battery for their handheld devices. So they forced the battery into the mainstream, and then everybody adopted it for phones, for laptops, and then ultimately into cars. But it didn't come from the battery industry. So where should we return for innovation? And let's remember that the battery was invented by a professor at the university, Alessandro Volta. Here he is. This is the first battery, a stack of coins, zinc and silver separated by cardboard soaked in brine. And the periodic table came to us from another professor. So you go to the university, that's where you find the radical innovation, not in industry, not the national labs, you go to the university. And so the other thing I alluded to in my introduction was access to charging points. Right now in the United States, there are about 50,000 charging points. The Biden administration wants to get that up to 500,000. And even that is going to be challenging because you have to look at the people that are not going to allow you to do anything. For example, you have people here in California that want to close down a nuclear power plant in Diablo Canyon. But those same people are blocking the installation of solar panels in the desert. So you can't have nuclear and you can't have replacement for nuclear. So how are we going to get adequate electricity? This is completely stalemate. And if you look carefully here, you know, if we really want to get to net zero, we have to install far more copper transmission lines. Otherwise, we won't be able to move the electricity around to get to all of those charging points. And yet the United States hasn't constructed a major transmission line for years. So how are we going to get there? And the big problem is copper. Everybody's talking about battery metals, nickel, they're talking about cobalt, talking about lithium. They should be talking about copper because we haven't heard an announcement of a new copper mine for over 2 years. And the copper supply is inadequate for the build out of all of this new charging infrastructure. And so with that, I say that the copper shortage will stall electrification. And so I'm going to take Jinhua's title and say it's more than bumps. The bumps have become potholes, and the potholes have become sinkholes on the road. And mining alone is not the solution. There are people talking about we got to open more copper mines. That's only half of the battle. The other half of the battle is copper extraction. Mining gets you copper ore, but we need copper wire. To get copper wire, you need copper metal, and then the copper metal can be drawn into cable and so on and so forth. And the legacy process by which we make copper is filthy. So it's paradoxical. In order to build out the carbon-free electric future, we do so much harm to the environment by mining and so much harm to the environment by smelting and so on. So that's why I worked so hard on Boston Metal to develop a steelmaking process that doesn't pollute. And now we have to invent a copper refining process that doesn't pollute. So storage is going to be the key thing. If we put the storage at the charging point, then maybe we don't have to put so much copper wire. Look at this little back of the envelope calculation. Let's say an EV has a 100 kilowatt hour pack. And let's say you want to charge it to 50%. That's 50 kilowatt hours. And we do it in 1 hour. That would mean we would need a 50 kilowatt line. But no motorist is going to wait for 1 hour. Motorist wants 1/10 of an hour, 6 minutes. That means a 500 kilowatt line. You realize what a 500 kilowatt line looks like? And if you want
That's right.
6 or 10 of these, it's crazy. So I say put storage at the charging point. You have a battery that contains several hundred kilowatt hours, and then you can get B2B, not business to business, but battery to battery. If I have a battery of, say, several hundred kilowatt hours, and you come with your car, I can very quickly drain down and give you 50 kilowatt hours in a matter of minutes. Do you think that every one of those people standing at the filling station on the side of the motorway, that each one of those hoses with the filler is connected to a refinery? No, there's a big cistern beneath, and we're taking the gasoline out of the cistern. So why are people modeling this as each one of those charging points is connected all the way to the generation plant? That's stupid. You're not using your imagination. So you say, well, why don't we have the stationary storage? It's a really tough problem. Long service lifetime, must be safe, fireproof, ethically sourced, secure supply chain. And I say you make it out of earth abundant elements, and ultimately they could be recyclable. And it has to be super low cost, because it's not battery versus battery, it's battery versus hydrocarbons. And of course it cannot be lithium. Lithium is a 30-year-old technology. So when I started my work on liquid metal battery, I coined this idea of cost-informed discovery. I think about cost at the beginning. The university paradigm is invent the cool chemistry. No, I don't care about the cool chemistry. I want to make sure that the thing is scalable right from the beginning. So that means avoid certain parts of the periodic table. And I'll just give you one example of what I come up with in the last 5-6 years. A new battery, it's aluminum chalcogen. So here's one example that we look at aluminum or aluminum, whatever you prefer. The negative electrode is aluminum, not lithium. And the positive electrode isn't NMC, nickel oxide, manganese oxide, cobalt oxide. It's elemental sulfur. These are both abundant, cheap, and the electrolyte is a low melting, cheap molten salt. This is something that is radical innovation, not the volatile, flammable electrolyte that we use in lithium ion. That's not to say that lithium ion is universally bad. It was designed to power your handheld devices. It was never designed to be a 100 kilowatt hour pack in an automobile. So anyways, this is one example. And capital cost of these components is less than $5 a kilowatt hour, about 5% that of lithium ion. And we've reduced this to practice at MIT. And I've started, as Jinhua mentioned, I've started a number of companies, and one of them is called Avanti. And I'm now trying to scale this up for commercial application. And the march to new technology continues. There's still plenty to be done. So this is what I talked about today: the cost parity, the battery, the range anxiety, access to charging points. And storage is always the answer. That's my most overarching comment. Storage is always the answer. And for that, it's always about invention. So I think with that, I'm going to stop my delivery and throw it open for questions. So please, let's have your questions.